I'm Cody from Game Life Balance US, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the one you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other geeky podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of Better Podcasting. My name is Stephen John Drew, and with me today is the superior Stargate Pioneer.
It's episode 26. We're getting a little bit more responsible heading into our adult lives. We're saving up for a down payment on our first starter home, or we've bought our first starter home and now we got to do yard work. We got to get the flower beds ready, and we have to actually start hunkering down with responsibility. It's a big responsibility to be 26. It really is.
I don't do responsibility very well.
Yeah, and that's what your wife says. Steven, time to do the dishes.
That's so true, so true. By the way, this is a very interesting episode. If you're watching the video companion, which we do have available at betterpodcasting.com or at youtube.com/GonnaGeek, you are going to see that SP is surrounded by microphones. By surrounded, I mean all of 2 microphones. You'll see on his right, your left, the lovely RE320, the Electro-Voice RE320, and on your right, his left, you have the beautiful Shure SM7B. He has both microphones going today, and why is that? SP, what's going on with those?
Well, ever since that I purchased these, like in Christmas time, like Black Friday last year, we have thought to ourselves that we are going to do a comparison. So after 2 months of using the Shure SM7B, after 2 months of using the Electro-Voice RE320, it's comparison time. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. We teased it 2 weeks ago. So I actually have both of them running. I am fortunate enough to actually have 2 DBX 286S. I thought the used one that I purchased before was broken. It is not. So when I bought the new one, that gave me 2 mic processors and gates or whatever, preamps, to actually use for both of these. And I've got the Zoom H6 recorder, so I'm actually recording both tracks simultaneously. So it's going to be a fun time for us to compare and contrast. Because this is decision time for me on which microphone that I'm going to keep, but it's also going to be fun for the listener and the viewer to determine which sound that they actually prefer.
Yeah, and here's the thing with it. We're going to give you a fun little thing, a little comparison, a blind taste test. Right now, SP is on one of the 2 mics. We don't know which one it is. Well, I do, but unless he lied to me. Maybe you lied to me, SP. That could be. I don't know. But he's on one of the 2 right now. And we're going to right down the middle, give or take. The first 2 segments are going to be on this mic. And by segments, I mean this little welcome opening. And then the main feature topic will be on the same microphone. Then when we get to the Better Podcasting download, he's going to flip it over to a different microphone. And then we will do that and the feedback on the other. So this is going to give him his little back-to-back real-life comparison so he can finally decide. I personally think I know which one he's going to choose, but we'll see. So you're going to be able to have fun with us as well and listen to the comparison and tell us what you think. And keep in mind, both of these microphones here he has going into the DBX 286. He mentioned that. And the DBX 286s, they are on different settings. He has dialed them into how he prefers that microphone to sound, trying to go with a similar sound for both, but he took the 2 months to dial both of those in individually. So now, based off of the dialing in, he's trying to decide which of these two sounds do I like. So a little bit of variance there, but still you'll get to hear the difference between the two microphones. And let's just start off here in this opening, reminding you that we do have a contest going on right now. We are giving away a beautiful Logitech C920 web camera. This web camera is the webcam that SP and I use. It is one that a lot of other video podcasters do use, and you can enter for this. You know, you don't even need to necessarily be planning on doing a video podcast. It's just a great camera, and we're hoping we can give you the taste for free, and then you'll end up deciding to do a video podcast later, right? So email us. If you're interested, email contest@betterpodcasting.com. Please do tell us why, or not why, but how you are going to, how you are going to use this webcam. I almost said microphone there too, SB. Wow. I'm just living in the past.
It does have a microphone in it, but I wouldn't recommend it for podcasting.
No, I agree. So tell us how you are going to use this webcam. Are you going to use it as a monitor mount? Are you going to mount it separately, like on a tripod? Or are you going to put it in your go bag and take it mobile? Tell us what application you're going to use this for. And if you want as well, feel free to tell us a little bit about your first webcam experience, keeping it friendly, very, very work friendly. We don't want all those gory details of a young 13-year-old Stargate pioneer.
Webcams did not exist when I was 13, sir. They simply did not. If they did, the world would be a very different place. And I fear for my kids when they become my age and then stuff surfaces from when they were 13 and they had cell phone videos. And they're like, oh, yeah, it doesn't go away. It's still there.
Yeah. So following up a little bit before we do dive into the rest of this, we talked briefly about my previous experience that I had with webcams. And I want to tell you where I am narrowing it down to, and I'm hoping to get a definitive date at some point. But I can tell you this, that I had a webcam at least in 2001. And I'll tell you, 2001, how I narrowed it down, because one of the things that I did with my own personal webcam, and keep in mind, this was after the family had the family webcam. This is after all of that happened, and webcams got to the point that they were more affordable. So I was given my own webcam. Are you ready to laugh, SB?
Oh, I'm always ready to laugh, especially if it's at your expense.
I had a pet rat. And
what?
I had a pet rat. I'm not lying. And I set up a website that offered a webcam of the rat. It started.
You did rat porn?
No, it wasn't rat porn. It was just a rat. Like, you want to check out what the rat's doing. It got hits. And it started off as a FTP thing where it would snap a photo with this webcam and then upload it. And then eventually I was talking to my brother about this, and he reminded me at one point I set up a real video streaming server for the webcam. So that was, I went to archive.org. I found the second version of the site, and unfortunately it didn't snap it, but I can see where, with the date that it went to attempt to, and that was 2001, and then that was the second version of that site. So presumably at least 2000, I had a webcam, if not earlier. Then when you factor in, as I was talking to webcamming with family, the family webcam, probably looking circa 1999. So somewhere in that neighborhood was when my first webcam experiences came. But for me, the highlight, of course, was the rat cam.
Well, I'm glad you differentiated the family from the rat, because I was just going to accuse you of calling your grandmother a rat.
No, very different. So there you go. That rat is long deceased. So you can, listener, viewer, go ahead, roll with that idea. Webcam, enter for the C920, win that C920, and then set up your very own rat cam.
Yes, you can.
And email contest@betterpodcasting.com. Let's just go ahead and dive into the main topic. Should we do that?
I don't know why you'd want to, but I bet you Lab Rat Lauren, my co-host on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Longbox Edition, would like your story very much.
All right, here we go. You'll never be able to look at a rat without thinking of me again.
Well, I will, because I think of lab rat Lauren all the time. That's what I think of with rats. And
fair.
so many rats, so many rats lost their lives in the pursuit of science this year.
All right, so this week we are going to be doing a bit of a follow-up, a debrief about last week's episode. That's right, last week we gave you the C2E2 panel experience. We took the footage from that and we played it for you. As we introduced with that, we did end up doing that audio primarily through a certain phone camera's audio. And here is the thing about it. We learned a lot from that experience, didn't we, SB?
Oh, we learned a ton. First of all, it was my first actual panel that I was quasi running. It was Naki's panel, but it was me that was trying to record it because we were trying to distribute it on the network, which we did on Better Podcasting, so that was great. But we didn't know what audio sources were going to be used in the room. I kind of figured it would be like any other convention. They'd have huge speakers nearby, and then you just put the audio recorder right up to a speaker and you'd get a nice booming sound. Not the case. It was actually room integrated sound. So I couldn't even locate a speaker on the ceiling to point it to. And even if I did, I didn't have a shotgun mic set up. And we had a very limited time to set up the entire thing as well. So we did the best that we could. We set up 2 video cameras. We had 3 audio recorders going. And unfortunately, we weren't able to tap into the room audio, which is it all conjoined into getting the best that we could. Now, we did learn a lot of things coming out of this, and we would like to display that or talk about them with you, just in case you are planning on doing something similar. It doesn't have to be a podcast about podcasting.
No.
You could be doing a podcast about leather making, which, believe it or not, is a very big thing at a convention, or how to get started in comic books or whatever. And if it's related to your podcast, then you'd want to record it so that you can share it with your audience later. And a lot of people do that. So this is just a few tips and tricks that we learned during our first attempt that we are going to improve upon the next time we do this.
Absolutely. So as SP mentioned, it was integrated room audio. So the best way that we were able to tackle that was to take the audio source that was closest to that speaker, that had the best pickup of that. And what ended up happening there was that you ended up being a little bit distant from the audience. And I'm sure you heard that a little bit. Some of the audience questions were a little bit hard to hear. And so how exactly could you tackle that? Well, there's a couple ways. Number one, the audience, if you've got somebody there that is able to be a runner, that's going to be your best way to do it. You dedicate them to be a runner, running around that audience and capturing that audio from that question from that person somehow. So you could do this through a couple different ways. Number one, if you got yourself a little handheld recorder with some form of apparatus that allows you to plug in a microphone, that's great. So that person just runs over, puts the microphone in the person's face, they ask a question, and you've got that captured and you can insert that later.
One of the things that I've started to do is using the recording capability of my iPhone or iPhones, because I have the luxury of keeping all my iPhones in the family since we did the iPhone 4S. And so I've got a couple of 4S's, I've got an iPhone 5S, and I've got my iPhone 6 Plus. So using that as an audio source, it's amazing. That microphone on it is actually pretty good when it comes to recording a panel or recording audio as you're running around. So you definitely can do that and just try to isolate the sound. You're going to have to do some splicing of the audio later, whatever, and get that in there because it's not going to be optimal source for the panel itself. But you can definitely do that, and everybody's got one these days. So you just walk around and do that. If you want a little bit better audio sound, you can do what Steven was saying, and you can do a recorder with a microphone, or you could do a hybrid, because using an application like Boss Jock Studio or iJingle or whatever, you can walk around to people with an ATR 2100 that is plugged into your iPhone using a camera connection kit, which offers a USB in, or if you're using an Android, most of those actually accept the USB in. You'll have to buy a little adapter from a mini or a micro USB to a normal USB, but that works pretty well too. It worked with my Samsung Note 3 that I had pretty well. So that's all good that you can do there. And it just makes more sense. And then if you don't have the ability to have a runner to go around, you can do one of two things. You can actually put a microphone at the front of the room that you ask people to come up to and ask their questions. This was more of a classroom-like setting, so it would have been a little bit more difficult for that. Or you can have one condenser microphone that is in the middle of the room and can capture the audience a little bit better. But the key there is to make some sort of concession to capture the audience reactions, to capture the questions, because what you're going to be focusing on primarily is capturing the audio from the panel. So you want to make concessions for audience, either if it's just a laugh track, you'd want that captured as well.
Yeah, so there's a variety of ways that you can tackle that. But the point is, if you're interacting with the audience, make sure you plan on a way to capture that audio through one of those methods. And it could be as simple as, use what you've got. If you have an extra camera, an extra phone sitting around, use that as in place of that condenser that SB said. Go put that camera near the audience, and that'll be closer to the audience. So maybe you can pick up the audience a little bit that way too. Now, one other thing that we noticed with the playback last week was that sometimes some of the panelists were a little hard to hear. Now, again, talking a bit about the unknown scenarios when you go to a convention or you plan on doing a live podcast, this was an unknown. We couldn't get the information on how many microphones there would be. How would it be set up technically? We could not get any of that. We tried to, but unfortunately, we didn't get that information. So if you watched the video companion at all, you would have seen that there was a bit of microphone sharing going on. There wasn't enough microphones provided by the convention for each panelist. So you put some microphones in between people and you ask that person to end up coming up to the microphone or moving the microphone when they go to speak. So that's what we had to do at C2E2.
Right, which made it really interesting because it was the first time that I really understood that different people have different capabilities or different voice projections. So like Chris and I were both sharing a microphone. His voice projects a ton better than mine does. So I was having to get up right on the microphone. I was actually screaming into the microphone, or so I thought. And it was a lot less loud, basically, to the perceived listener than Chris was when he was a foot away from the microphone. But to help that out, try to get people whose voice project about the same together. If they're sharing a microphone, definitely turn the microphone back and forth to each individual that is using the microphone. Don't try to get your heads together. I mean, you don't have to kiss the person next to you, but try to maintain some personal space, but yet go back. And this actually helps with over talking as well, because both of you aren't going to be talking at the same time. Each is going to know, and there's a visual cue, there's a physical cue as to who's going to talk next and that sort of thing. And that worked well there was 4 of us that were using 2 different microphones, and that worked well for it as well. So just know that you might have to do some mic sharing. And it happens even with the professionals. If you watch some TV show panels, I mean, we're part of Gonna Geek Network, so we do a lot of geeky things, whether it's comic books or whatever. If you see a big panel for a movie or a television show, you'll see that not every panel do they have an individual microphone for everybody. And so they end up sharing as well. So this is not limited to a hobby podcaster sort of panel.
Absolutely. So what other ways might you possibly tackle that? Well, if you can afford it, you could secondary mic everybody. So what we mean is use the audio that you've got provided to you by the convention or wherever you are, and then bring your own gear to help mic for your recording later. Now, a great way to usually do this is, so it's not too obtrusive on the desk and everything, is to use lav mics, right? Now, the thing is with lav mics, they're condenser microphones, so they might pick up a little bit of the background. But again, it's a live scenario, so there's the expectation is to not be like it is when you're recording your podcast at your home. There's a little bit more of a live sound to it. So if you can do that, bring your own gear and mic everybody up. You could also, if you can't afford to mic everybody up, you could do the same shared mic scenario that we talked about before. Take some of those lav mics and strategically place them between people because they are condensers. And what's going to give you better audio? Having a camera somewhere in the room picking up the audio, or lav mic space between your panelists. That will give you a better quality than just the camera in the middle of the room. So you kind of got to weigh, what do you want to do? Another creative way is if you got a bunch of people coming together to pool resources. This is one that SP thought of, which was to take what handheld recorders that you have and place them between people. Because again, that audio is going to be better than a camera in the middle of the room. That's a very interesting idea that you had, SP.
Well, it's kind of sort of what we tried to do. We did place 2 recorders kind of at the beginning of the audience, and then we had one on the table. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to pick up the people on the ends. We had it in the middle of the table, and they weren't dialed in correctly either. They didn't have enough gain to them. So it was very soft recordings, and it picked up a lot of room noise to it. But yeah, if you have a bunch of different podcasters like we do on the network that have their own equipment, you can strategically place them out. You can also strategically place them out with microphones. Say, okay, everybody that has an H5, come with 2 microphones and just place those 2 microphones wherever you can. And then we'll splice the tracks back together in the end as well. So there's just a bunch of different things that you can do. But remember, you have a limited amount of time to set up. They're trying to roll from panel to panel. And if you're not able to get going, you're losing some of that time that you have. And at the end of that time, you are done. The next group is coming in. So you have to be able to break that down really quickly as well. So you can't take an elaborate amount of time to put up this complicated setup and then take it down either. So you have to be ready to go, I would say, in under 5 minutes. And if you're not familiar with what you're doing, please don't get frustrated, but you might not get a good product. Your setup might not work the first time out, and you might have to do what we're doing, is learning and going at it at another angle the next time we do it.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing that we wanted to talk briefly about, which is the idea of using a shotgun mic or a couple of them, because shotgun mics, while they are meant to be directional, they also still pick up a broad variety of what's around. So if you were to take that shotgun mic and strategically place it at your panelists, so probably a little bit back. Yes, you're still getting some of that room noise, but you're going to end up still picking up a more narrow field than just a regular phone camera in the middle of the room. If you can do 2 shotgun mics on a panelist of like 5, you're going to be set, because you point one of them towards half of the panel, one of them at the other. You can bring them in a little bit closer, eliminate some of that room noise, and you can either merge the 2 tracks or just bounce back and forth in editing between the 2. So a variety of different ways, and it's all about thinking outside the box. How can we best capture this? Or, just accept what you've got and you can do like we did, which was just use a camera source. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do it, but like SP said, a bit of a learning experience from us as far as picking up the audio goes. Now, one thing that I do want to quickly touch on here was, as we mentioned, we do a video companion as well. And I am going to highly, highly suggest, if you end up doing a video podcast, I recommend you do what we did, which was have 2 cameras going. Now, the reason I suggest that is because you can, especially if you're in like a 5 or 6 person scenario, you can get the cameras a little bit closer or pointed at different people. So for us, we had them on opposite sides of the room. So on one camera, you could see a few of the panelists better, and then on the other, you could see the other panelists. But what's really nice about it is it helps hide your edits. So if you do want to edit out a section or whatever, you can do so and just switch the angle during that edit, which is going to help hide it, as opposed to using just one video source. And then you start to see that sort of traditional YouTube jumpiness. So that is something that I personally recommend you do. As for me editing that video, it made it a lot better in those cases.
And keep in mind, if you bring more technology like multiple phones or multiple cameras or whatever, you're going to have multiple stands, whether they're desk stands or tripods that are floor mounted, or you're trying to put the phone in some nook and crook or whatever and lean it up against something. You're going to have some way to stabilize those, because when you start them, nobody's going to be around to touch them unless you have a crew with you, and we're going to assume that you don't, because you're hobby podcasters and you don't have a big roadie crew that runs around with you all the time, although that would be awesome. And you need to have the infrastructure available for whatever you take. So you have to think a little bit ahead. If you have, and since you don't know what kind of room you're going in, do I need tripods? Do I need table mounted tripods, or should I bring both? I mean, these are all up in the air things, and you don't want to have to bring too much. You don't want to have a whole truck full of gear that you have to bring. It was at least a half a mile, if not a full mile, from my car to the room. So I didn't want to bring a bunch of heavy stuff with me. So we tried to slim it down as much as we could. I think for the cameras, we did pretty well. I think we'd want to do a few, maybe one more camera shot, 2 from the side, 1 from the middle next time. I don't know, but we will see what we can. Of course, that's extra gear, because it's not just the camera, it's the tripod as well. It's any audio source that you want to add on to that as well. And you have, again, limited amount of time, so you don't want to take too much gear with you either.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And so really look at what you've got and think about, how can I best use this? Because that's how we essentially ended up doing it with ours. Was we looked at, what do we have, what's everybody bringing, and how can we best use this? And you'll learn for the next time, because there might be something you do a little bit different. But overall, a great learning experience, and we hope that you enjoyed the panel last week. And if you have any other recommended practices on how to do this, if you've got any experience on some creative ways that you thought to mic things up, please let us know. You can tweet us at BetterPod, or just go to betterpodcasting.com. And I think we need to register Better Podcasting, because I keep almost saying that, but go to betterpodcasting.com, because we want to hear what your creative solutions are. And really, at any live event that you have a variety of unknowns, you're going to be getting creative.
Absolutely. It's the only way to roll.
For sure. So that's going to go ahead and wrap us up for this topic this time. Before we do go into the Better Podcasting download, I'm going to remind you that SP is going to switch microphones. Ooh, so this is the point where we switch, and you'll find out which microphone you like a little bit better. Here we go.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
A quick download this week. We are talking about our initial Google Play impressions. That's right, Google Play, we talked about it last time, has hit. And we've got a bit of experience now using it, both from the podcaster and the consumer side of things. This rollout ended up going pretty much as anticipated, which was certain users started to get it, certain user platforms started to get it, and in turn, it was a bit of a slow rollout, but now we're starting to see more people using it. And my initial impressions is that from the user perspective, they've done a very good job. I've got it on my phone now. I did have to go and manually update. It didn't come through, so I'm guessing that's a permissions change. Usually with Android devices, if you do end up having a permissions change between an update, you have to go in and manually say, yes, I agree to this, because, privacy and all that stuff. So I had to do that. But once I did that, very easy to navigate. Right when I go in to what people call the hamburger, it's essentially the menu in the app, you end up seeing that there is the podcast section in there, and searching and subscribing was a breeze. The only weird oddity that I got with that initially, and it's fixed now, was that for some reason the descriptions of the shows as well as the descriptions for the episodes were not showing up for me. Now, I know that was a device problem or an update problem with my type of device, because Chris Farrell, who we've had on this before, I messaged him about it because I knew that he had it going, and he said no problem at all. He goes in, he hits the little info button, and sure enough, there's the full episode description. For me, when I did that, it was just blank on every single podcast that I checked out. So don't know why that was initially, but they must have done another update and fixed that, because now it's working fine for me. SB, I know you've only seen screenshots. You don't have this going on yours yet, right?
That's right. I'm on iOS for most of my devices, actually, and none of them have upgraded from the 3.9 whatever to the 4.0, which is, I'm guessing, is the version of Google Play Music that is necessary. So yeah, I haven't had the chance, the opportunity to experience Google Play Music, and I hear I'm not the only one. I hear it's definitely been a slow rollout. I've tried to kick the upgrade, and I just haven't been able to. I'm at a loss, really, of how to upgrade this. And I guess a bunch of people out there as well. Now, this was not a big bang. Google did not come out and advertise this everywhere. They didn't say, hey, look, we're over here. We now have podcasts on Google Play Music. Nope, they didn't. It just came out and they told the podcasting community, and they were like, yeah, if you guys want to advertise it, go ahead on your own. So this was left to our own devices, basically, as a podcast community. I know a lot of people did very successful marketing, and they said, hey, look, here's where to find us on Google Play Music. Here's the URL, click on this and you can find us there. I know I tried that on my podcast as well. But another thing is they didn't offer statistics for like a week. And to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to delve through our stats in the past week to see what sort of increase this Google Play Music has really gotten our podcast. So I look forward to looking into that in the future as well. But it's been kind of a whimper rather than a bang for me personally. I know it's had more impact on those that use the Android OS a lot more. So I just hope that people are enjoying it, because this is something that Google is a big factor in mobile devices, and podcasts haven't been able to flow through the main Google infrastructure yet. And now it is. And I'm not talking to a lot of podcasters that say, oh yeah, we got a ton more downloads through this. And it's really not been the case, which we thought was going to be true. And I'm looking forward to kind of a slow evolution here. And by Christmas, by this time next year, I think it'll have a lot larger impact than it does today, because the Android user base simply does not have the podcast listener process. It's not normal in their daily routine as it is in the iOS devices.
Now, I've been somebody who has been using a variety of different apps for a while for this, and one thing that I noticed, and I had to try this because we've talked a little bit about searching by people and things like that. And what I decided to do was go into the Google Play app and type in Stargate Space Pioneer and see what comes up, because I know that there's some podcasts that he tags as him as the artist. I really, really like how they have it organized within the Google Play Music app, because remember, the Google Play Podcast is part of the Google Play Music app. So I go in and I type in Stargate Pioneer, and I see it divided quite easily by category. So the first category says artists, and then I could click on it and then end up driving in, and it'll show me a bunch of other subcategories. It'll say Stargate Pioneer, all my songs, or Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., or Starling Tribune. So it shows a bunch of that there. But if I go into the other categories, it then divides it by videos. And then if I go even further, it ends up showing the actual podcasts that somewhere are tagged by Stargate Pioneer. Now, why I want to bring this up is because the GonnaGeek.com podcast showed up on that search. That is one that SP does not have him listed as the artist. I don't know how it figured it out, but the GonnaGeek.com podcast did show up with him listed. So it somehow realized it through one of the details that I've put somewhere in the tagging in the RSS feed of GonnaGeek.com podcast. and it is properly listed him there when I search for Stargate Pioneer. So very, very interesting to see that searchability there. Now, it doesn't actually, believe it or not, list Better Podcasting on there. I don't know why, but it shows to me the potential of Google Search King. They really are. They are Search King, whether or not you want to accept it, doing a podcast app. Because I know I've tried that sort of thing before on the iOS version when I had an iDevice, and it just basically showed me when someone was tagged as the artist.
Wow, that's interesting to me, because I might have a theory or two about the Gonna Geek podcast, but if Better Podcasting isn't on there, that theory really falls apart. So I'll be interested to see how this evolves. I will look forward to my Google Play Music app upgrading, and we'll see how this goes in the future. I know that Google's tags are named differently, but they're basically the same tags as iTunes use. They just didn't want to maybe get into a trademark war, copyright war, or whatever, and they didn't want iTunes being able to shut them down. But they basically take a normal RSS feed, which is modified specifically for iTunes, and they throw it into Google Play Music feed tags as well. And I know some or most of the media hosts out there can modify their tags that you put in for the different destinations or the different directories, like Google Play Music, iTunes, TuneIn, that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering how specific and how divided the community is going to become, or how integrated it is eventually going to be in standardization. So this is stuff that's really in the weeds, folks. We're talking maybe years down the road. And who knows if podcasting will even exist at that point in time as we understand it today with RSS feeds and stuff like that. But this is an exciting time. I'm really excited to see how this grows over the next year, even if it hasn't been advertised that much by Google.
Agreed. So very fascinating to see these changes finally coming to light, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But let's go ahead and move into a very, very busy feedback section. Here we go. We have a plethora of feedback that came our way since we recorded last, and I'll start it off with you, SP, to read the first feedback that we've got.
Well, actually, we posted on our Facebook page, what topics would you like us to cover in future episodes? And Kevin Richardson got back to us, and he said, 1, how to get better quality sound from your guests. Do you double end? Do you use Zencaster? Do you use Google Hangouts on Air, Blab? How would you do this? Well, I would say recording capability is definitely one. But on the other hand, you have to deal with their audio at the source, right? And these people are not podcasters. You might be lucky enough to be looking at somebody or interviewing somebody or having somebody that's guesting that is a podcaster themselves. And I would assume that their audio quality should be pretty good on the outset. But in case they're not, what do you do? Well, we will definitely be covering this in future episodes, so stay tuned on that. He also asked how to engage with your podcast audience, how to grow your podcast, how to get more reviews, and how you deal with negative reviews. And does the hobby podcaster need an email list? So, hey, if you really, listener, viewer, if you want us to cover any specific topic in the future like Kevin Richardson did, please let us know. You can respond to that Facebook page post. You can email us, podcast@betterpodcasting.com, or you can catch us on Twitter @BetterPod at any time. And we would love to hear from you on future ideas for future episodes. We will be talking about this for Kevin in the future.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why we wanted to ask a little bit about it was because we do have a list of topics where we're going and whatnot, but sometimes if someone has a specific question, we can work it into one of those episodes so we know, okay, let's make sure we cover this element of that in more detail. So feel free to let us know. But for you, Kevin, I'll just give you a quick rundown. The answer is yes, no, 1, 3, and 4. So that's the answers to all of your questions. So there you go.
I see. And as in true Canadian style, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Well, we had Diami Peloki send in information to us, a question. It was a follow-up a little bit to that lovely last contest product that he did end up winning, the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. And he asked, basically, well, you go ahead and summarize, SP.
Well, basically, he was having a great time using it as he intended to, mobily, and he was out at the convention and stuff like that. And he even had tweeted us pictures of him using it with another microphone as well. But he was walking around his conference, and he was like, hey, what do I use to actually take this around with me? I mean, do I just hold it in my hands or whatever? And so we were able to get back to him with a bag that one of my co-hosts on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., that's Lab Rat Lauren, who we talked about earlier in the podcast. And it's a specific bag that I found on Amazon. It's just, it's a mobile audio recorder, portable digital audio recorder bag. And we will put that link in the show notes. And if it works for you, great. I think it was somewhere around $25. And it was big enough to have a audio recorder and a microphone or two, or maybe a stand, something like that in there. And I think that's great. I know a lot of people actually put it in their backpacks, and you know how those backpacks have those little holes in them for headphone cords. Like you can put whatever you're listening to in your backpack and have that audio cord come out. So you can do the same thing. You can, if you have a backpack that has one of those holes in it, you can put the audio recorder there and then have the XLR cord coming out of that, and just, as you're interviewing people on the convention floor or whatever, have the microphone out and do that. So all great questions from Diami. And once again, we will have that specific link to that Amazon portable digital recorder bag in the show notes for you.
Absolutely. So then we ended up getting tied into a feedback for or a question that someone had asked Chris Farrell. They had asked about a certain mic boom arm. They are asking about a somewhat generic named microphone swing boom arm, whatever you want to call it. It was a etiquette black microphone suspension boom studio broadcast scissor arm stand holder, and it looks very similar to a lot of the ones that you find that are. I think there's one company that do a lot of these lower price point scissor arms and then redistribute them amongst a bunch of different quote unquote manufacturers, because a lot of them do look the same. And we were asked a little bit, or referenced a little bit, about which mic arm we use, and it is the Heil PL2T that we use. Now, talking a little bit about these more inexpensive mic arms, SP nor myself have really any experience with them, but we do know people who use them. My understanding is that a lot of times the springs are a little bit noisier. They may not take as much weight, is a big thing. Apparently the weight can be a bit of a problem. So keep that in mind. But if you're just using a regular handheld microphone, if you want to give it a shot, I say go ahead, because you don't know unless you try it. And it might work for you, it might not, but as long as you just go into it with the understanding that you're not going to get the same quality as either the Heil PL2T or the Rode PSA1. There's like a $150 difference in some countries, and you're just not going to see the same.
Yeah, I actually know somebody that picked it up, and it does squeak quite a bit. It works as much as you want. Like, you don't see me or Steven reaching and moving our mics throughout the podcast that much. So once you find a spot for it, you should be okay. But if you do need to move your boom arm during the podcast, you're not going to want one of the cheaper ones, that's for sure. And if you're just starting out and you're like, hey, I don't even know if this is going to work for me, yeah, go with one of the cheaper ones just to see if the concept works for you, and then move ahead. That particular one that we were asked about is kind of weird because it points up. The mount for the microphone, it points up rather than down. So it's probably not for a very heavy microphone either. And if you're looking at that class of microphone boom arms, then I'm guessing that you don't really have a big microphone like these large diameter microphones that we're using right in front of us right now. So yeah, go ahead, use it, try it, see if the concept works for you. And then if it does, then you can jump up to the Rode, what is it, PSA1 or the Heil PL2T.
Exactly. And the thing with both of those that we just mentioned, the Heil and the Rode, those have internal springs a lot of the cheaper ones have external springs, so something else to clang on if you are moving it or whatever. But different things, different strokes for different folks. That's the saying. There we go. I said a saying once, right for once. Then we also were asked on episode 4 of YouTube. We had a passion for dancing had asked us a question about PowerPress. They said, I have started using PowerPress WordPress plugin to set up my RSS feed and to submit to iTunes. But now I want to switch to Podbean. How would I go about migrating? Do I have to delete my old RSS feed and create a new one? Well, it's your call. There's 2 ways that you can do it. If you want to go to Podbean or Libsyn or Transition, you got to ask yourself, do I want to use their RSS feed and get rid of my old PowerPress one? Or do I want to keep people coming to PowerPress and just duplicate the information from Podbean or Libsyn or whatever? Because what you can do is keep using Podbean as your media host, like if that's where you're going to go. And then whenever you post a file, you come over to your PowerPress or whatever WordPress plugin you're using, and you enter the information in there. So users are still subscribed to your main website where you're using WordPress. They're getting the information from that. It's just you have to go in and sort of double post it. You have to go and post it to your media host, Libsyn or Podbean, and then transfer that information into your PowerPress so that the audience can actually get it. So that's your call. The other option is you can go ahead and redirect it to that media host. Now, my recommendation would be not to do that at first, because why did you just make that switch? There's something that just happened that made you switch media hosts. And is that something going to happen again? If you're going to end up making a switch again, you don't want to go and take all of your traffic from hitting your website and getting your podcast information there, then go and make them all subscribe to Podbean. And now you go, no, you know what? Podbean doesn't work for me. I need to go to Libsyn. And so then you go and now you've got to redirect everybody from Podbean over to Libsyn, or vice versa. Maybe you went to Libsyn and now you want to go to Podbean. Like, there's a variety of reasons. And for some reason, you've just switched. So I say do the double entry for a little bit while you get comfortable. And then you can decide, am I good long-term at this media host? And if so, then I would say set up a web redirect and talk to your web host about that, because they'll usually give you a hand with that. Otherwise, email me, Steven@betterpodcasting.com, and I can try to point you in the right direction for that as well.
Once you've done that redirect, once you've done that final cut, just first of all, know that anybody that's subscribed to your old RSS feed is not necessarily going to be able to get to your new RSS feed. So you might want to put a last episode in that feed saying, hey, look, we've moved feeds. You're going to have to subscribe again in iTunes or whatever, because iTunes basically redirects to your initial RSS feed. So if you do actually go with a completely different RSS feed, you're going to have to do some finagling for your subscribers, because you might lose a few in the process. Unless
you do the web host redirect, and then you'll be good, because that web host is going to do it, and it's going to be a solid thing that's going to go over. So if you're getting rid of that web hosting, that might be another thing. Sorry, good point, SB. If you're getting rid of that web hosting, you're going to want to make sure you use the iTunes redirect tag as well, because you're going to want to tell all of those clients that you got to subscribe to a new URL. So I would suggest keep your web host and your WordPress up for a while longer while you do get settled in.
Yep, totally agree.
And then finally, we did have another question asked on the YouTube video. It was actually more of a statement. We were told that somebody bought the Audio-Technica AT2005 due to our recommendation, and they absolutely love it. So very, very cool to see that our recommendation worked out for you, because everybody's voice is different. We love that microphone as well as the ATR 2100, and thanks for taking the information we gave and running with it. That's awesome.
It is. I love that microphone. It is just so versatile, and it sounds pretty good to me personally. So not every voice will sound like like you'd want it to through the AT2005. It is a good microphone. You're going to be able to, I said the wrong thing there. Your voice is going to be crystal clear through the AT2005, but it might sound just a little bit different EQ or whatever. So if you're looking for a specific sound to your voice, you might look into another one, say like the Blue Encore 100 or the Shure SM58 or any of the microphones that of the bouquet that I'm sure Steven is assembling right now for the video watcher. So you can try different microphones if you're really looking for a great sound, but you're a hobby podcaster. You don't have a lot of time to, unless it's your thing dealing with sound, you don't have a lot of time to mess around with which microphone really sounds best. I mean, and that's funny for me to say because I actually have two microphones in front of me right now, right? But that's just because this is important to me, and that's part of the podcast that we're doing now. If I didn't have to worry about it, I would just choose like the ATR 2100 or the AT 2005 and let it be and try to create the best content that I could.
Agreed. So we hope that everything we talked about today helps you as much as it did end up helping the listener. Quick Facts, which is an awesome name, by the way. It should be a program, I think. But
Quick Facts.
Yeah. So
what's a fax?
I remember what a fax is. Some of our audience probably does not, but very, very good to hear that you're happy with that microphone purchase. So if you have anything else that you want to chime in about any of these topics, please go to betterpodcasting.com, write us a comment, or email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. So before we do close up here, we'll remind you, we're part of the Gonna Geek Network, and there is a variety of great geeky content on there. Go to GonnaGeekNetwork.com, and if you have a show that you think would be a good fit for the network, please go to GonnaGeek.com/join, and you can apply there. The whole criteria is laid out, and then we'll end up taking your application and reviewing it. Before we finally go, though, SP, let's do one last comparison for the audience. Right now, you are on the same microphone that you were on for the feedback and the download. So go ahead and why don't you say, I think that Steven is the greatest, because then we'll have you repeat that same sentence again. Say that right now.
Gotcha. I think Steven has some mental issues he needs to work on.
All right. So now you need to switch over to the other one and say the same phrase.
I think Steven has some mental issues he needs to work on.
I thought I was going to trick you. But there's your comparison. So we want to know, what do you have to say? Again, betterpodcasting.com. Tweet us at betterpod, or just email us podcast@betterpodcasting.com. Which microphone did you like better? So that does take us to the end of episode number 26 of Better Podcasting. For episode 26, I'm Stephen Jondrew saying, hopefully you really enjoyed the special feature last week.
And I'm Stargate Pioneer saying, catch us anytime. We'd love to talk podcasting.
Bye!
See you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.